Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So we are going to start bang on time because we have 30 minutes and it's going to fly. My name, as a very quick introduction, is Natasha Munasinghe. That is a pre-COVID haircut and I haven't got my headshot, so I apologize in advance. I run a company, I know a lot of you through some of our programs, but I run a company called Frank, and we're an education and training company. And the reason we exist is really prepare graduates for the future of work and employment and whatever that's going to looking like in this modern COVID workforce, which we're talking about today. So how this webinar is going to run is we're going to do very quick. I'm going to do 3 minutes of PowerPoints, introduce everybody to the agenda, switch over then to just a Q&A with Linda and myself, and of course hearing from all of you. I also want to very quickly intro Gabby and Snare from my team. If there's anything you need in the background, please send them a bit of a chat message and they're there just to answer and help you out. The star of today's webinar is Linda Apostolidis. She's the director of Newy Tech People, a growing, very exciting to see, a growing recruitment company based in Newcastle, but a ton of experience in terms of technology recruitment. She's got previous experience at Hudson, another sort of recruitment firm, and the Walt Disney Company. How we know Linda is she was a mentor for one of our employability and entrepreneurship challenges called Interchange for some of our student teams. So that's how we came across Linda and really wanted to hear more from her from her experience. In terms of the agenda today, the series of webinars we're putting together, this is the second one. It's called the Skills Gap. And the reason it's called the Skills Gap is there was a little bit of research we came across that said when it came to employability and workforce prep, there was a bit of a gap between the expectations of what employers wanted and what graduates and students thought were needed in terms of skills. There's a bit of a gap. And so we wanted to focus on sort of really narrowing and addressing that gap. So today's about workforce professionalism, things like job search, behavior, skills, and well-being. What does that look like in the modern workforce? In terms of expectations for this webinar, it's really a focus on graduate and student needs. So if you're a student, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you're someone that sort of advises students and graduates, welcome. And if you're here because you've randomly found a link on the internet, welcome to you also. It's nice to have you. Just as a bit of a heads up, we also have a 2-question survey at the end. We just want to know how to do this better. You're all masters at this, but the main thing in terms of Zoom is trying as much as I can to make this a conversation. I have my set of questions for Linda, but definitely if you have questions, put them on chat. I really want to hear from you, much more than from myself. The mic's on mute, video most welcome, and also just a big heads up that we are recording because we want to be able to share this with everyone at the end of the session. Final bit is from a training and education point of view, the world in 30 seconds as we kind of see it in terms of the COVID workforce is we see the last 2 years were really about survival, and now we can start being a little bit more intentional. I know a lot of us, myself included, had to collaborate, innovate, be flexible. We saw lots of opportunity, but also tons of challenges and just daunting things in terms of the pace of change. I found it really interesting that Korn Ferry, who advises companies in terms of hiring, they were saying that almost 70% of the world's most admired companies now are really valuing learning, agility, and curiosity over or as much as career history and experience. So what does that impact in terms of grads and students? We're seeing a really high demand for soft skills, and there's a really interesting report by the World Economic Forum just came out on some of the new skills, and innovation and problem solving are number one in terms of most sought after skills. We have Gen Z coming into the workforce, so these are the late sort of 20s, different expectations, different literacies, different demands. What do they bring into the workforce? And we're seeing sort of flatter organizational structures, and this impacts things like development and a whole bunch of things in terms of our career growth. This is kind of a set pace for this webinar. We want to set some context. So now I'm going to stop share, and Linda, it's going to be you and I.
Hi, Natasha. Thanks for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining, Linda. I'm super keen. So for everyone else, if you have questions, keep putting them onto chat. So Linda, first thing, I've given you our view of sort of the 30-second helicopter view of what the world's looking like. But from a recruiter point of view, what is this modern workforce? What are we kind of in for?
Yeah, sure. And I think you touched on it perfectly before, Natasha, when you mentioned that when we first came into sort of COVID and it was first happening around the world, we were very much in survival mode. A lot of companies were and had to react really quickly to sort of move their workforces to sort of more remote workforces, and also, you know, sort of hiring and making decisions around hiring and when it's best to bring on people and how do we onboard people. So there's lots of challenges. And now that we've had that first stage during COVID, I think a lot of companies have learnt from that. And a lot of companies are now sort of really honing their onboarding processes to make sure that they can hire remotely. People have a good experience through the recruitment and onboarding process and feel sort of welcome from day one. So you're correct. There's a lot of companies that have a remote first workforce, which we do at New Tech People. But there's also a lot of hybrid models that are working where people are sort of having set days in the office, or choosing their days, or the company's choosing their days. So there's really a blend we're seeing. Most of our clients are either hybrid or remote first. So that brings a lot of challenges, particularly for graduates that are entering the workforce for the first time, and how they navigate that and how they put their best self forward during the interview process, how they look for jobs is changing as well. How they network and meet other professionals in their industry of choice is also changing. So there's lots of things to be learnt.
And so when for the graduate students, you know, young professionals maybe doing earlier career changes, are there any new or underutilized sort of ways of finding jobs or building relationships with potential employers now?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, sort of obviously the traditional methods of job boards are still there. I think, you know, sort of developing more of a social media presence on LinkedIn and following companies that interest them and reaching out directly to those companies. Also getting involved in, you know, in the tech industry, for example, there's a lot of meetups that you can go to and meet other professionals and meet leaders of companies that you might be interested in. So there's lots of different avenues to network still in this remote world that we're living in.
So again, it's sort of saying in the same theme around looking for a job. Are there behaviors to avoid when it comes to professional etiquette? And I'll preface it by sharing a story of one of the HR managers in one of the banks was saying one grad went through the interview process, got the offer, but then used the offer to go to another company and say, you know, I got an offer here. Would you consider, you know, having me or trying to leverage that? But didn't know that the two HR managers kind of knew each other and talked, and then didn't get either offer. And they were saying, you know, those type of behaviors you really want to avoid. Is there stuff like that you want to maybe share?
Yeah, definitely want to avoid that. I think that comes down to your research, and if you're going to go for a job interview, you really want to be interested in that company or working for that company. So definitely wouldn't advise playing job offers against other companies earlier in your career. You know, sort of Australia is still a fairly small market, so the chances of people finding out, you know, are fairly high. So definitely, you know, sort of in terms of bringing your best self forward to a job interview process, you have to show that you're committed. You know, it is a two-way street. The company has to, you know, sell that opportunity and that culture to you. So I think really doing your research up front and understanding that culture, is it going to be right for you, I think will set you in good stead.
And so how do job seekers, young professionals, grads really showcase their skills and talents and kind of stand out in the virtual space, but now also, you know, a crowded and global space?
So it depends on which field. So obviously, New Tech People, we hire a lot of software engineers, for instance, and the ones that do really well have either portfolios on places like GitHub, or they could be a graphic designer that has a portfolio of projects that they worked on during university. I think that's really key in terms of showcasing your skills and your ability and the areas that sort of interest you. So having some real examples from university, or even an internship to show an potential employer is really important.
Does work in the gig economy kind of count towards some of that experience Linda, how do you sort of showcase? Or...
Yeah, so there's lots of young professionals now that are taking on sort of freelance jobs on the side while they're at university even. So I think, they're definite real life examples of work that they've delivered that can showcase their skills and experience. So that's definitely an area that they should focus on as well. They can.
We were sort of reading some research around now that we're all kind of virtual or virtual/hybrid. One of the main issues or challenges for a lot of us were around well-being. We're stressed, we're burnt out, we don't know how to switch off. For those that are going into the workforce, which is a lot of the audience today, how do you go about sort of managing well-being? What are some things to do, sort of tips, strategies? How do you communicate it to employers that there needs to be boundaries? Any sort of recommendations that way?
Yeah, I think it's understanding the environment that you're going into and asking those questions during an interview process in terms of, what are the expectations of working hours, performance. And I think it's really important, and I'm still, sort of figuring out what my sort of rhythm is. I, for instance, feel like I'm much more productive sort of early in the morning. So that's when I sort of get sort of some of the more difficult tasks done. So it's finding your own rhythm and making sure you have lots of breaks and getting up from your computer, because it is really hard, and it's something that I'm still working on, having that balance. It's very hard when you're working from home to finally switch off for the afternoon and go about the rest of your life. And I think it's really important. So it's something that we've implemented with our team in terms of sort of rest breaks. We've sort of talking to each other when we're having sort of challenges, but exercise, just getting up and getting away from that screen is really key, I think, and learning when you need to switch off.
Are you seeing companies sort of still stick to sort of the 9 to 5, or they're much more flexible in terms of when they expect you to be, at your laptop, at your desk?
Yeah,
and you can set a little bit more schedule.
I think the difference now with working remotely is sort of gone are the days where you had to be seen at your desk to be doing your job. And sort of the longer that you stayed up in the office, the better. I think, sort of it's something that needs to be discussed on an individual basis with your manager. If you get all your work done and your manager is now sort of managing you based on outcomes and deliverables, then if you finish at 3, you might start a bit earlier. It just depends on the workplace, depends on the meetings that you're expected to attend. I think it's, based on an individual basis, really, with the company and your manager and what works for you.
Okay, so that was sort of getting into the workforce. So let's say now you're maybe in your first job or just sort of very new into that workspace.
Yeah.
What is good professional etiquette if, your manager is virtual, some of your team is virtual? What are some things to do that show you're actually, enjoying the work, good at your work? How do you, show that to somebody if they don't actually meet you in person? But also, what are some behaviors just to avoid that could be a mark against your name?
Yeah, sure. So I think communication is the first one. I think understanding that different people, different team members, your manager may have different communication preferences. So, for instance, at new tech people, we have sort of not rules, but kind of like a playbook in terms of how we communicate with each other. So, everyday questions, we use Slack rather than email. Phone calls are for really urgent, pressing, sort of questions that the team needs to ask. And then we have our sort of general catch-ups over Zoom, which will be scheduled meetings each week. And then we try not to have any meetings on a Friday when everyone's sort of finishing up for the week. So I think learning what a company's preferences are for communication channels and really respecting those. So that's sort of probably the first one. I think managing expectations as well. So understanding what your leader or boss is expecting of you in terms of your performance, and then checking in with them. Don't be that person that the boss is always having to chase and ask, has this been done? Be on the front foot about that and managing the expectations. Also ask for help when you need it. Don't sort of sit at home, sort of working away by yourself and, get yourself in a bit of a mess. Ask for help if you need it. Ask colleagues. Don't be afraid to say that you don't understand or that you need some guidance. I think forming relationships virtually with your team is another challenge that is going to take time, and the way that we naturally you're going to form friendships with the people that you work with, but the way that we communicate and interact with each other at work is very different to how you may interact outside of work or with your other friends. So I think, sort of always being professional in the way that you speak to your colleagues and the way that you respect them, respect their time, is really important. Also, there's always going to be politics, office politics in most environments. So avoiding gossip. And the biggest lesson that I learned was whenever I had a challenge with someone or in a situation, the only person that can resolve that for you is the person involved. Don't go and talk to 10 other people and complain. You don't want to be seen as that person that's stirring up trouble. Always, sort of speak to the person involved and resolve it that way. I think, there's a lot of situations where companies might reward workers for sort of having a half day off on a Friday. If we all achieve this goal, knock off at 12 o'clock. Be really mindful that you're actually delivering on what you need to, and it's not just a free-for-all if you haven't delivered. So just be really mindful of that. And don't make assumptions about what sort of acceptable behaviour in the workplace. Sort of watch for sort of social cues. Is it acceptable for you to be on your phone during a meeting? Probably not. Is it acceptable for you to be, posting on social media during work hours? Probably not. Be really mindful of that.
And so if you're new, so all great points. If you're new into an organization, how do you find out what the social expectations are in the team, in the organization? Who do you look to? What do you look for?
I think you ask your leader. So you sort of ask the right questions, talk to your colleagues, but really you need to be taking guidance from your leader.
Okay. And how are companies these days doing performance reviews? How do they know the really awesome workers that you're doing the hard work? Is it the same as before, or are they, using different ways or different strategies?
Well, sort of going back to what I was referring to before this COVID world, you were sitting at your desk from 9 to 5, you must be doing your job. More companies are very much outcomes and delivery focused. So you will be measured, I imagine, in different organisations have different KPIs and objectives. So you'll be measured on that regularly. You'll probably have regular one-on-ones, still virtually, whether weekly or fortnightly with your leader. So it just depends on the organisation and their KPIs, but you will be managed on your deliverables more so than how much time you spend working.
And so if you're going into an organization and the leader, the supervisor, the boss isn't having these conversations up front with you, because, I guess we're all learning at the moment.
Yes.
Is it okay to be proactive and
Absolutely.
Have the conversation, even as maybe the junior employee?
It's probably even more important now than ever that you can't just walk up to anyone anymore if you're not in an office environment. It's really important. It shows interest, it shows curiosity, which is really important to, I guess, sort of stand out and be noticed, and sort of being proactive will take you a long way in answering those questions. So don't just assume, like I sort of mentioned before. If you're unsure, you need to ask questions.
Okay. And any things maybe you do in your team in your office around when you were sharing the example before everyone came through that you hired some people, but then your business partner only met them after lockdown. Yeah. So how do you go about building relationships with people that you need to work with daily, but you kind of need to get to know them as human beings? Anything even your team did that really worked?
So one of our clients is a fabulous company called Remote Social. So they exist to help companies bring their teams together for remote social events. So we sort of leverage those guys a lot. There's lots of different sort of vendors and activities that you can do. So we put everything down at 11:30 on a Friday, and we catch up, and we either do a trivia session, or we did a virtual escape room, which was lots of fun. So we're all fairly competitive. So it was a lot of fun to do that activity. I think where you can meet your colleagues in person for a coffee or a lunch is still really important. So my business partner, for instance, lives on the Central Coast, so he went into lockdown a lot earlier than I did in Newcastle. So I got to meet the new team members, but he has only just met them recently. So I made sure that I was catching up with them, sort of fortnightly outside of home, and they were getting out of the house, and we'd go for a walk even when we weren't allowed to go for lunch. So I think looking for those times where you can have face-to-face interaction will go a long way in terms of building relationships with your colleagues and your manager.
Yeah, I was reading another story of someone mentoring. So they had the leader mentoring one of the junior employees, and they do mentoring walks when they could meet outdoors.
Yes.
So they did that once a month or something, and that really worked for both people. So it's out of the context of the office, but it was not over screen, and they still got a lot from that mentoring chat.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
I'm a big fan of walking meetings and walking one-on-ones.
Okay. Drilling down just because you said some really great things on communication, and I know now in communication, we maybe a lot of us are working from home at least a little bit of time, and we could be texting, we could be WhatsApping, we're adding GIFs and memes, and sometimes. So is it okay for, really on a very practical sense, to ask for you to use emojis and emoticons and GIFs in our work conversation? And I know even in my emails with clients, I only do it after they've done, put an emoji in after I've seen them do it. Because I still don't know what the etiquette is around that.
Yeah, look, I think I think you need to sort of read the environment. If you're meeting the CEO for the first time over Zoom, maybe don't do it. But amongst your team, I don't think you need to show your personality, because that's how you build trust with each other. They need to see your personality with you. Personally, I love a funny meme. Sarah, who does a lot around our mental health and remote work and all of our policies around that. She loves to start a presentation with a bit of a meme to lighten the mood, and I think it's perfectly acceptable. Obviously, steer away from, the more aggressive ones. You've got to be really, really careful about the content and the information that you share with your colleagues in the workplace, and that goes back to what I was referring to before around, naturally you're going to build relationships and build friendships at work, but they are work relationships, and how you interact with your friends outside of work is not how you should interact with them at work. Yeah,
great tip. So I'm coming to my last question, everyone. So please, put any questions you have down on chat, because we'll finish off in a few minutes. The final question, I guess, from me, Linda, is around upskilling. So I mentioned that Korn Ferry stat where learning agility, curiosity is now a really valued attribute in people coming in. How do you show that you're able to learn or that you're curious, and then where do you go and do it so that it counts?
Yeah, so there's so many resources available. So I think having that curious mindset and that continual learning mindset is really important. And I guess the way that you sort of demonstrate that is, sort of going into a new role, if you see things that could be improved, offering up, sort of your thoughts around that. I think there's lots of online channels. LinkedIn Learning has a platform that you can do courses. Check out what your company has available. Usually they have a learning and development portal, and that will help skill you up. Find a mentor within the business if you can. That's really key, and that's been important for me during my career, finding someone that I trust to bounce ideas off that I've had. So I think, having that continual curiosity at the world around you and the work that your company does, and particularly when you're looking at a company and particularly interested in working for a particular company, there's so much information around and news available for you to read before you go for a job interview that you can bring with you to an interview.
And so as a recruiter, with your recruiter hat on, do you count, a digital a micro credential I do if I do a course on something like Coursera or Udacity, which is not maybe tied to my study or even an institution, does that count in terms of the eyes of a recruiter?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think it depends on the organisation and the role that you're going for. Obviously, if it requires a certain degree, there's not much that a recruiter can do about that if the client's particularly wanting that experience. But I think doing sort of those short courses shows that your willingness to learn and expand your horizons, I think, will hold you in good stead.
Okay, great. So I'm putting some hours in, Linda, myself.
Mm.
So Sai, I have a question from you. How should someone go about linking their LinkedIn to their CV? Is there a way to do that?
Yes. So you can upload your CV to your LinkedIn profile. So I use LinkedIn Recruiter a fair bit. So if a company looking at your profile via the normal LinkedIn platform won't see it, but a recruiter can download your resume. So there's a way that you can do that. I'm happy for you to message me. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head how you do that, but I'm happy for that person to message me and I can help them. But you can attach your CV. Another easy way is to, your LinkedIn profile is your CV, essentially. You don't need to include every activity you did while at high school, but, sort of your relevant work experience, your qualifications. Treat that LinkedIn profile as your CV, because recruiters can also download that as a PDF.
Okay, amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And so I saw also, Linda, LinkedIn is creating a new feature where you can record a video. Is that something you pay attention as a recruiter? If something like that, if someone did a 30-second video about them, or not so much?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And okay. some clients have that as part of their hiring processes. So when you apply for a job, you may be asked to answer a set of questions and record a video of yourself. So I really recommend you practicing that with someone that you trust. And practicing it before you sort of get into that. But yeah, I think that's a great way. It's not for everyone. Everyone doesn't feel comfortable. You don't have to. But sort of a lot of companies are using video in their recruitment processes.
Okay. Caroline, who is an advisor at a university, careers advisor, has asked if there's any tips or thoughts on professional dress sense now that and how this is impacting when it comes in a remote work sense.
Sure. So I think you need to, so at work, each company will have, I guess, a policy. It's a little bit looser now that we're all working behind screens, but I think you really need to understand the requirements of that company. If you're going for an interview, it's likely going to be an in-person interview or on Zoom. Always dress like you are going for an interview. I think you always putting your best foot forward is what I would recommend. Certainly, I've had people turn up to interview with me in tracksuit pants and t-shirts with holes in it, and it was very hard to focus on anything else but that. So always dress professionally for a job interview, and then you need to read what the company's policies are, or ask during the interview what's the expectations of dress sense.
Awesome. So we're down to 2 minutes. I'm going to get a lot down. I'm going to do last question from Eliana. I guess there are some international students in the audience, Linda, as you would have worked with during interchange.
I saw some familiar faces.
Yeah. For international students, one of the main things, the barriers, is having local experience. How do you, I guess, overcome that barrier? Eliana's asking.
It's a really tough one, because at the end of the day, the client, I've had some clients say to me that .NET developer doesn't have experience in Australia. And I'm like, well, pretty sure Microsoft is same everywhere in the world. Yeah. So it just depends on, again, it depends on the hiring of the company. Some companies aren't set up to, do you mean the international students applying for jobs in Australia and staying overseas, or do you mean the ones coming to Australia on visas?
I'm not sure with what Eliana was saying, but let's just say they're onshore and would like to stay and work here. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, so you've obviously got to get some experience if you've, first in Australia. I think you've obviously got some skills to bring, and I think you need to highlight that. I think companies are less and less, sort of saying to applicants, you must have experience in Australia, unless it's a particular industry and they need to understand Australian law, or just depends on what the industry is. So I think just, any graduate, whether you're coming from overseas or locally, showing that willingness to learn and that you're coachable and that you're willing to get stuck in and have a great attitude, I think is the most important thing when you start on this. You're not expected to have a lot of experience.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to sort of the end of this webinar. I want to say, Linda, thank you so much. The 30 minutes has flown, and to everyone that put in questions, thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of you. I just want to say very quickly, and lots of thank yous coming your way on chat, Linda. We have another session coming through in December with Dr. Eunice Sari. So if you're interested in everything around virtual teamwork and maybe drilling down into some things Linda was talking about, was really how to build relationships, what are some of the communication platforms, please jump into that. I think Gabby is going to put the webinar link onto the chat, so jump in. And I finally just want to put my PowerPoint slide up, because as I said, this is the second time we're doing this, and we just want to keep improving. And I've got a 2-question survey for you. So I'm just going to put the screen now so you can do it, and then give us your evals via your phone or your laptop. So whilst you do that, then we go. Whilst you do that, I just want to say to Linda again, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Best of luck with your expansion of your firm.
Yeah, thank you.
And to everyone else, keep in touch with us, but also if you have any other questions for Linda, send it through to me and I can send it to you, Linda, if you want to have any responses, and send it back.
Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing the recording with you via email after this also. So if you've done the eval, thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you, and thank you for giving us your time, and you can now go enjoy lunch, particularly if you're in sort of Sydney. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.